You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
And intercepted by the Eagles. He is hit. They got him again. They got him back at the 26. He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles.
Can we do the intro one more time? Can we run the intro one more time for the people at home? Like, did anybody miss that wants to see that one more time? Because it just still doesn't feel realistic. Like, did everybody
watching it?
You were watching it?
I'll be honest, I got a little distracted. Were we supposed to be watching it? You want to run it back?
Yeah, we're running it back. We got to do it one more time. Just one more time for the people at home, for Zach.
You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
And intercepted by the Eagles. He is hit. They got him again. They got him back at the 26. He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles.
Zach was still not looking. I'm gonna let it go. I'm gonna let it slide. I saw him not looking. He's looking way to the left. But welcome on.
I got some monitors. You don't know.
Whatever. Welcome all to episode 201 of Flipping the Birds. And it's a special one. It's his Eagles free agency, right? This is the tampering period, right? And on Monday, the tampering period began. The Eagles signed Bryce Huff to a wild 3-year, $51 million contract. And then what everybody was waiting for, what everybody considered to not be true, to be the most false report, because Howie would never spend this kind of money on a running back. Saquon Barkley is a Philadelphia Eagle, boys.
Yep.
I mean, I can't be the only one excited. Like, how do you guys feel about this? I mean, we'll discuss all the signings, because right before the podcast, if you guys missed it, Chauncey Gardner Johnson is returning to the Philadelphia Eagles on a 3-year, $33 million contract, which is huge as well. But let's start from the top. I mean, we'll start at Saquon, then we'll go to Bryce. How are we feeling about Saquon Barkley wearing midnight green from here on out?
How are you feeling, Brian? That's a big change. Maybe you can be an Eagles fan again.
All right. That's the end of the podcast, folks. Thank you for joining us today.
I feel amazing. Man, I feel good. It almost doesn't feel realistic, man. It hasn't really sunk in yet. Like, as good as DeAndre Swift was, and I mean, he really was good. I had nothing against him. If he ended up being the back that the Eagles went into the season with, I would have been happy. But this just adds another dimension. Like, literally, everyone around me last night watched Saquon Barkley highlights. I was broadcasting them through the household, man, and it's like I'm just fired up. It's the kind of thing where it's just like, I usually don't get the same kind of excitement I do for free agents as I do for like draft picks. Like when we drafted Jalen Carter, I was watching Jalen Carter highlights for like 2 weeks straight, and it feels like that again. Like it's like a brand new pair of shoes. Like a free agent sometimes feels like a nice pair of hand-me-downs, you know, and you really appreciate that and you're really excited. But this just feels like a brand new whip. Like, I don't know what it is, but it almost hasn't sunk in yet because, I mean, outside of Christian McCaffrey, you just signed the best running back in the league. And that was one of the things where we weren't really sure. I think, like, the indication was we weren't really sure how much weight the Eagles were going to put into the running game. And then not only do they make a huge statement saying, okay, we're going to dedicate ourselves to the run game, they get the guy essentially that was available. So I'm fired up, man. And yeah, like I said, it hasn't really sunk in yet.
Zach, how you feeling, mister? I haven't not seen the intro video yet.
It's another great offseason so far for the Philadelphia Eagles.
100%.
Saquon Barkley. He's ours now, New York. And what's hysterical is that the entire conversation around Barkley has shifted in New York. And it's gone from, effectively he's been the MVP for the Giants for years, at least the past 3 years. He's been a fantastic back when healthy, and he's been, for the most part, healthy those past 3 years. Now, all of a sudden, oh, no, the offensive line wasn't the problem. Now, all of a sudden, oh, no, he's not even that great of a pass-blocking running back. Now, all of a sudden, oh, well, you're going to regret giving him that kind of money. I'm not going to be honest with you. I do see this as kind of a baby CMC kind of a pairing. That's kind of been the predominant conversation. I mean, you got a guy who I don't know that they're going to use him in the receiving game as much. I think you're probably looking at like a slight step down in the receiving game from CMC and a step up from running out of the backfield from CMC. That being said, Kellen Moore does seem pretty clear that he's going to be able to use him in a plethora of different facets in the game. Really interested to see exactly what his plan is with this just ridiculous amount of talent that this offense now has. I mean, it is. We're talking about a video game roster. It's completely ridiculous. So, time to see, how you can get everybody touches. That's always the problem, but it's a good problem to have, especially right now when you really need it. I'm over the moon for the Saquon Barkley signing. The other free agent signings, which we'll get to in a little bit, I am just as excited, if not more so. But this is absolutely an A+ start to the free agency tampering period for Harry Roseman.
This is a step in the right direction for me. I feel like for years we talked about how the running backs are not important to the league anymore. The running backs, they're not worth this money, right? Bullshit. Like, you can't have a potent offense without a decent running back. You can't have a great offense without a good running back. And the Eagles have a really freaking good running back that was once considered to be a generational running back. The guy, like Zach had mentioned, was the MVP of the Giants for years. He carried this team, injuries and all, right? Carried this team to the playoffs and did his damn thing. Am I worried about the injuries? Not at all. He's only missed 7 games in the last 51 games, and he's rushed for 2,800 yards during that period. This is huge. Like, this is great for Jalen Hurts. I feel like he's the number one person that won in this deal. He gets a guy that can actually shoulder the load for him. He gets a guy that now, like Zach was mentioning, Kellen Moore can be Saquon and Jalen if they do run a little bit of the RPO here in Philly now. They bring that back with a more lethal weapon like Saquon. It's going to be phenomenal to see. I'm excited. I do agree with Zach. I don't see him being a huge part of the receiving game. I do think they go to the draft for that individual. I think they're going to look for speed in the draft when it comes to running back a little bit later in the draft if they can. But this, I'm over the moon. I called it in the Eagles chat, Zach, right? I said this move was going to happen when I was driving on my way to pick up my daughter. I got my daughter on my way home. I pulled over the car and started celebrating with her because that's how big this move was to me. Phenomenal move. We can move on to Morgan's favorite part of football, the defense. Bryce Huff, 3 years, $51 million. A lot of people are on the fence about it, right? Because the potential is there. But the production was from one season as a part-time player. Morgan, what do you think that Bryce Huff is really going to bring to this defense? And is this possibly our Josh Sweat replacement?
Yeah, I mean, as much as Saquon Barkley is going to make a huge difference on this team, I think when you're talking about this free agency, you might look back and think that Bryce Huff is the crown jewel of the free agency, to be honest. Like, I don't see any way in which he's not a productive member of this defense. For me, like, obviously the biggest concern is how is he going to deal with more snaps and facing the run a little more? He was mostly used as a situational pass rusher in New York. That defense as a whole really had its ebbs and flows. Talented defense. They put up really good numbers, but I think their week-to-week production was very different on how they won. They won in a lot of different ways, and that's the marker of a good coach. But I think that consistency is really going to help Bryce Huff now that he is, in Philly. But I think what it is realistically is he's coming into a situation where a lot of the things that people were worried about, he just doesn't have to deal with. Like, he has to get better against the run, right? He has to, work with a bigger workload. And the Eagles are still so deep in that rotation. He's not going to have to do that. On rundowns, you can just put Nolan Smith in there, right? And he can be an off-ball linebacker as well if you need him to be. So then you even have depth behind him, like worst case scenario, right? And so there's just so many different ways they're going to be able to use him. And to me, I mean, it's a bit of an easy comparison, or maybe a homer comparison, but he just gives me a lot of Brandon Graham. That's what he's a hard worker, right? He's a bit more athletic, right? So he does a better job converting speed to power. His first step's a little quicker, but he's just relentless. Like, this dude never gives up. He's the kind of guy that, with a defensive line like that, that's just creating situations for you to kind of have these, these finishing tackles, right? Like, is he going to create a sack on every play? No, but he doesn't have to, right? Sometimes you just need a guy that's going to work his butt off and then clean up when the defensive line pushes the pocket, right? And that's what they were kind of, not lacking so much, but obviously Brandon Graham's lost a step, right? And they didn't really have that rotational guy on that side, right? As soon as Josh Sweat kind of started to dip off, like, they just weren't having the same kind of production. You had a guy, he's what, 25? And he signed him for 3 years. He's going to be hitting his prime in Philly. And for what it's worth, most likely with one of the best defensive interior lines in football. If Jordan Davis can get it together and last the whole season, we know what Jalen Carter is going to be. Again, it's about stamina, but man, this guy, like, he's already a 10 sack guy. And granted, not taking anything away from the Jets, but he is coming to a better team. We could be looking at 15, 16 sacks. Now it depends on how they use him, but I'm over the moon with this pickup. That's a great pickup.
That's solid. I mean, that's something. It's weird to say that's just the appetizer what happened, but I feel like Bryce Huff is definitely gonna be a sneaky pick. Zach, how you feeling about the former Jets edge rusher?
Yeah, a lot of people worried about him as a part-time player, giving up this kind of money, obviously. A couple things on that. First of all, I do think that you're going to see his role expand with this new deal. Morgan, you talked about him entering his prime, and I think that's kind of the mentality of the Eagles, is that, well, this guy's ready for a step up in responsibility. Effectively, like, to relay it to one of our regular 9-to-5s, the guy got a promotion. He took a promotion with another company. That's basically what this comes to. So I think that we're going to be looking at a bit more of an involved role for Bryce Huff in this year and in the years going forward. And then as far as, he was a rotational player, blah, 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 blah. The Eagles thrive at their most desired outcome or rotating that defensive line, specifically the tackles, but also the edge rushers as well. So that's not going to be anything new to Philadelphia, rotating these guys in and out. You mentioned Nolan Smith earlier. That's going to be a guy who, yes, even though Josh Sweat seems to be on his way out, I do think they will keep Hassan Reddick. They're going to be rotating Nolan Smith in and out. They're going to be rotating Brandon Graham in and out. This is effectively the ideal outcome where you're going to have quality players, at least 4 deep at these edge spots, where you're going to be able to not only move these guys around, but give them breaks here and there, hopefully keep them fresh, hopefully maximize them every snap that they're out there. So, I absolutely agree. I mean, 15 sacks, I definitely think that is attainable in at least one of these 3 seasons. Honestly, there's a chance that he could probably average 15 sacks over the course of this new contract. So it all depends on what happens going forward with the rest of this defense. We got to see what Vic Fangio's scheme looks like. Obviously, that's going to be a big difference maker. And it's listen, with this defensive line, in a way very similar to how the offensive line works, and just how the game of football is a team game. Your squad really matters. Obviously, on the offensive line, we know that. On the defensive line, it's true as well. If you have guys who are not doing their job, your job is significantly more difficult. So we're going to need to see peak performance, obviously, out of Bryce Huff with this new contract. But on top of that, Hassan Reddick, we're going to see growth out of Nolan Smith. We're going to see that performance out of Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, just like you mentioned, Morgan. But if all of that does go according to plan, which I have a pretty good amount of faith in all of those players that I just mentioned, Nolan Smith, maybe we wait and see a little bit, but otherwise, feeling pretty good about this signing. And I think it's one that, exactly like you said, we're going to look back on and say, oh my gosh, this might have been the top addition of the entire offseason.
I want to add a name to that too, because I keep forgetting about him as well. But man, if Milton Williams can continue the streak he was on to end the season,
for sure,
that's a formidable defense. Like that's your third best defensive lineman as it stands right now. Like people are worried about what the rotation is going to look like. The Eagles just keep adding guys, man. Milton Williams is going to have a heck of a season.
I wouldn't be surprised if they do draft a defensive tackle a little bit later on. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about, because again, we're talking about rotations. We're talking about wanting to be, I think they'll probably want to be about 5 deep. And we'll see exactly what kind of formation they're running. You know, if you're having Carter playing, that straight up defensive tackle, or if they're kind of switching to like kind of a 55, and you put them a little bit at that flex end. We'll see exactly what happens as far as that goes and who's technically a D tackle, who's not. But adding one more through the draft, you obviously have Marlon Tuipulotu as well, who's been a solid contributor.
Who's Zach's favorite guy, by the way?
Has been fantastic. So Tuipulotu is my guy. Ever since the draft, I've been all aboard on him. I'm so glad he's still here in Philadelphia. Still definitely on that train. So Marshawn Lynch, please do not remind me. I do have the game up, so we do not need to talk about the Sixers being down by double digits. But thank you very much.
One thing that we need to really quick talk about, sorry to interrupt you, but can we talk about Flipping the Birds history at the moment? I know the Sixers are down by double digits, but the Flipping the Birds team is actually up by triple digits. We're at 268 people that are currently watching the show. And if you guys can, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you guys like the show. Definitely tune in every Tuesday. Tune in every morning to watch Trending in the AM as well. We got your Eagles coverage literally every day. But yeah, just to remind everybody out there, Saquon Barkley is actually a Philadelphia Eagle. Didn't know if anyone knew that.
Saquon Barkley is a Philadelphia Eagle. Bryce Huff's a Philadelphia Eagle. Chauncey, Gardner, Johnson, CD Deuce, once again, an Eagle. Just a real good time right here in Philadelphia.
And listen to Marshawn Lynch. I mean, come on, guys. Let's like the show. So we covered Saquon. We covered Bryce Huff, right? 2 huge additions on day one. The Eagles also made a big move before free agency popped off. Landon Dickerson, the highest pay guard in the NFL. I believe it's $84 million, if I'm not mistaken, that he got signed to, and I think
it can go as high as 87.
Okay, there we go. The move to make, in my opinion, because that left side of the offensive line is phenomenal. I know Jordan Mailata had his moments last season, but Landon Dickerson has been nothing but consistent. Now you line him up again, with either Cam Jurgens at center, or you move Cam Jurgens to the guard, but most likely Cam Jurgens at center, and whoever it is at right guard. Like, it's impressive to see how well the Eagles have built in the trenches for years. And I'm saying that because a guy like Saquon Barkley spent most of his career behind the 30th, the worst offensive line in the league for multiple years, and is now behind probably one of the top 5 offensive lines in the league. Landon Dickerson, we know he deserved the money, but how are you guys feeling, post Jason Kelce? How are we feeling about this offensive line going forward?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think obviously Jurgens is in how he adjusts is going to be like the big swing, but locking Landon Dickerson is a massive move, and another way that Howie Roseman is just so savvy. You see so many teams reluctant to pay their top players, and Howie Roseman, he's kind of been ahead of it, and you really want to set the market, right? If guards aren't really getting paid off the shelves, but teams are starting to realize, I think, that in general, a lot of these guys, regardless of the position, when they're getting re-signed, they want top money. There's not that many players that are their team's top guy or cornerstone that are going to sign for less than top money, right? It just makes sense, right? These players want to get paid. They're not willing to be paid less than they're worth for the most part, unless they're taking hometown discounts. You want to be the one that's setting the market. And so not only did the Eagles get a guy, of course he's the highest paid now, but it's only a matter of time, right? The next contract's going to be higher, than the next contract's going to be higher. They got it done before free agency even started, right? And now you get to watch all these teams kind of scramble to pay their guards and pay their linemen. And it really is like such an underrated position in football. I mean, you kind of look at the Eagles and setting the tone, and the NFL being a copycat league, how much have these guards meant to the Eagles? Interior offensive line is so underrated, and you need it. And it just continues to be, a proving point. You look at the 2 teams that just played in the Super Bowl, fantastic offensive line, especially in the interior. And you just need to have it. So to be the ones that are setting the market, to get it done, to not have to worry about that, you're going through a transition period up front. So to have that benchmark already and that foundation already established is just a masterclass by Howie Roseman. Again, one of those moves that's going to go underrated, I think.
Yeah, when you have a guy who you're confident in, you want to show that confidence, right? So Landon Dickerson, obviously there were some question marks around health coming into the league, never around talent, never a question. He was a first-round talent. And injuries aside, this guy would have been a first-round pick. But the fact was he was recovering from a torn ACL. He's had several lower body injuries, going back before his NFL days. Flash forward, been pretty healthy at the NFL level. He's been a fantastic contributor, 2 Pro Bowls in 3 years. This is clearly a franchise cornerstone of your offensive line. And it's incredible to think about how many of those Eagles have had in recent years, because you think about how many each average NFL team has. And, there's 1 or 2 names who kind of stick out in a decade. We're going back. Landon Dickerson is the latest in a series of players, including, and I don't want to dismiss Jordan Mailata, but obviously he's in the middle of that. But let's look at Lane Johnson. Let's look at Jason Kelce. Even you could say Brandon Brooks, obviously was a free agent acquisition, but he was a stalwart here at the Eagles offensive line. Going well before that, obviously, you had guys like big name guys, Jason Peters, you had John Runyon. You had Trey Thomas. The offensive line has been such a focal point for Philadelphia for so many years, and this is a trend that is not going anywhere. And that is absolutely fantastic for the city of Philadelphia, for the Philadelphia Eagles, because it's shown time and time again how crucial that is. And Morgan, like you said, the guard position is often slept on, but when you have a guy in Landon Dickerson who's not only so phenomenal from a technical perspective, not only so proficient from that angle, but he's so athletic as well. It gives you so much more optionality in terms of how you can scheme this entire offense. So Landon Dickerson is he's the most athletic of this freakishly athletic offensive line, and he's really kind of leading the line in that sense from there. He addressed the media earlier today, and a few different things came up. Obviously, in the sense of replacing Jason Kelce, he acknowledged that there's no one who can replace Jason Kelce. There will never be another Jason Kelce. That being said, he does plan on stepping into a leadership position this season. It's going to be his 4th year in the league. That's pretty consistent timing for a player stepping in and establishing himself as a leader. That's a great thing to hear when you think about this team lost Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox. So we need leaders to step up, obviously, in this locker room. So hearing that from Landon Dickerson is obviously encouraging. More encouraging than that is listening to him talk about Cam Jurgens. You mentioned him as possibly the question mark, Morgan. And you listen to the way that Dickerson talked about Jurgens, and you start wondering how much of a question mark it really is. Now, obviously, you need to see that translate to on-field performance. And Dickerson was even asked about who will be the starting center for the Eagles next year, and he left it up to the coaches. I think it's all pretty obvious that it will be Jurgens. He was handpicked by Jason Kelce. That being said, you already see that leadership pouring through. You already see that that personality pouring through. That we're going to mess with Jason Kelce. We're going to start getting our own unique, great veteran leader on that line in Landon Dickerson. So there's a whole lot to be excited about with him.
And that's the key thing as well. With Jason Kelce moving on, me as a fan, right, and even as an analyst, I'm looking at Jordan Mailata and Landon Dickerson above anybody else when it comes to leadership in the future. Lane probably has another year or 2 left. Cam is still fresh. Tyler Steen is still very fresh. But you have a solid bromance going on that left side of the line where these guys, they're like best friends. And when you see them together, and now to have them both be pillars of this offense going forward, it's a sight to see. And I completely agree with you. Him just, praising Cam Jurgens, kind of saying, hey, they'll put us, in the best position going forward, come training camp, is the most professional way to go about things, especially when you're the highest paid guard in the NFL. But it's huge. This is a big move by Howie. He said he was going to be aggressive. He was definitely aggressive in the first 3 people that we announced. Extended Landon Dickerson, signed Bryce Huff, signed Saquon Barkley. We're going to go into day 2. Day 2 started a little underwhelming, then led to some fireworks, which, the big firecracker that people are not going to really agree upon, we'll mention last. But we started off with Zach's favorite drink, Matt Hennessy, being signed as a...
First of all, I do love a good Henny, but I do also want to mention that the end of day one, we did see the Eagles sign Zach Bond as well.
Yes, I completely forgot
someone
about that.
Who's definitely a player to watch. I don't expect him to be a full-time starting linebacker, but we talked about rotations. And one thing that you hear from people who paid close attention to New Orleans is that they felt like he was used incorrectly last year, and that he's a bit more of a pass rusher than he was used. So that's somebody who definitely, I think, as a special teamer, as almost a reserve on that pass rush, definitely someone who kind of goes under the radar, but could end up playing a role. But man, how about Matt Hennessy bringing him into Philadelphia? Temple's own Matt Hennessy. How great's that?
Are you buying a Hennessy jersey, by the way?
I have to. I'm legally obligated to buy a Matt Hennessy.
Okay, that's fair. So, that's very fair.
I may change the number, but yes, we are buying a Matt Hennessy jersey.
What would you change the number to?
I don't know. See, Landon Dickerson. I don't know. I got ideas. We'll see what happens.
I knew right away you're going to 69. I knew it right away. Hennessy 69.
We'll see if we can get triple digits. We'll see what happens. There's a lot on the table still.
Okay, fair game. Yeah, so they did sign Zach Brown, who Zach did mention that could be used in rushing the passer, and that was, if I'm not mistaken, that was his forte. That a lot of people felt was his strength coming into the league. It's been misused for quite some time. Morgan, I don't know if you've done your homework on Braun from.
Yeah, I mean, I think like what Zach said, like I think that's a really good addition. In depth, like I don't know that if he's starting, you're in a great position. I think it's similar to, having Nicholas Morrow and Zach Cunningham kind of overplayed what we thought he was going to be. But I think it's one of those additions, right? You bring in a veteran, you're hoping he shores up some stuff. He's a very technically sound player. I think, like Zach said, you're more comfortable with him in a pass rushing position, which, again, we're not really sure how this front's going to look. Obviously, they want to be multiple. So he's definitely going to have packages for him, and he's going to be able to rush the passer. But I think the biggest thing is, special teams. This is already one of the top special teams in the league, and you just want to add veterans to keep them honest. I think as well, just having that, you didn't get really any more experienced at linebacker. Nakobe Dean sat for half the season. Still we're not really sure what we're going to get out of him. It seems like his development is going to take a while. So having a veteran presence, you just need that in the room. As it stands right now, he's the only veteran really in that group, unless you count Hassan Reddick, and that's just not how he's going to be used. So I think it was important they add someone. I would still like to see them add to this group, but if nothing else, he's a good veteran presence, and he's going to contribute on special teams.
Sounds good.
So you mentioned the Eagles possibly adding someone else to this group. There's no specific word yet, but Josina Anderson about a half hour ago did say that the Eagles are still in the market and on the hunt for a linebacker one way or another. So we'll see.
Can we petition for Devin White?
Kidnapping.
Is that allowed? Can we petition for Devin White? Because he's still a free agent.
I mean, at this point, that's the thing. Now we are starting to run out. Once we saw Josie Jewell go, then I started getting a little like, okay, maybe we should look to add a linebacker a little sooner than later. No, but she does mention the versatility of ways that they could look to do that. I think the trade market's probably the least likely, I would suggest, but definitely still some veterans out there that you could potentially look at. And then on top of that, the draft has a few solid options at linebacker. Obviously, they do not historically draft linebacker high, but if you're looking at an Edgerrin Cooper, obviously Jeremiah Trotter gets a lot of love. A couple of the great names, but there's one. Cedric Gray, I think, at North Carolina. I may have gotten the name wrong there, but he's been kind of a fast riser in the draft as well. So someone who possibly a little bit later you can get good size, good athleticism, good head on the shoulders. So a few different options no matter which way you go.
I mean, they could. Hold on, I'm sorry. So apparently the Eagles are actually still interested in signing Justin Simmons. But it is being reported by ML Football, who doesn't have the best track record today, depending on who you ask. But yeah, if the Eagles are signing Justin Simmons, I'm all for it. So Landon Dickerson extended, Bryce Huff signed, Saquon Barkley, Zach Braun, Matt Hennessy, Devontae Parker, a few years too late, right outside of his prime. When Eagles fans were dying to trade for him, but still a solid piece to come into this season with. At least if he does, we don't know if he's a camp body. We don't know if he's going to make the roster, what the case may be, because we still don't know what's happening with Quez Watkins at this point. But Devontae Parker in his prime had a big catch radius. He was all over the place. He could be, useful in the slot. But it's this doesn't scream wide receiver 3 option. Like this just screams like depth or a camp body, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think he gives you that much less than Julio Jones gave you last year, and you needed to fill that role. So I think he comes in here, worst case scenario, I feel like he's gonna have one of those games again if he sticks to the roster where he just scores 2 touchdowns out of nowhere. Like that's kind of where he's gonna fit. Now, if he is more than that, it's a great signing. You essentially got him for pennies. $4.5 million for a year, like. It's really not that much. I think the Eagles had a lot of cap to work with, and so throwing a little bit of money to that to see if he can kind of regain that. The problem is for the last couple of years he's been dependent on to be a number 1 wide receiver in an offense that just can't pass the football. So I don't really necessarily think all of that is on him. Now he definitely dropped some footballs and he wasn't running great routes and et cetera. But those issues kind of compound and sometimes all you need is a fresh start. So I think, realistically he's going to come in and 100%. Like I don't think he's your solution at wide receiver 3. I think the Eagles address that, but if he's taking over that Julio Jones role where he's in certain packages, and then kind of a game or two, he'll kind of pop off because it's a favorable matchup. I mean, you did what you could to replace Julio Jones, and I think that's a pretty decent pickup for not much money.
I completely agree.
Yeah, you mentioned Julio Jones. I think that's kind of like the key comparison here. I wouldn't expect him to come and be a wide receiver 3. Could it be a pleasant surprise? Absolutely. I wouldn't be shocked if I'm thinking more than likely they look at the draft for that wide receiver 3, but I wouldn't exactly rule out maybe a late camp cut at wideout, something such as that they bring in to fill in that role as well. I mean, when you look at the money, yeah, his deal's worth near $5 million, but New England's paying most of that. I mean, the Eagles are only paying him about $1.5 million, so not that big of an investment on their end. I think that he does end up being more of a depth body throughout the season, and could become, kind of a camp body if he just doesn't pan out at the start of next season. So hopefully he's around more than that. But yeah, that's more so the tier that I would put him in. And again, we'll visit the draft and we'll talk some names in the coming weeks as far as who those players could be. But yeah, that's more than likely the way that I see that they're going to take that wide receiver approach for wide receiver 3.
I pitched in the Eagles chat for the Eagles draft Xavier Worthy, and Zach told me that my take was not worthy, that apparently he would not be there for the Eagles to take. So I don't know if he's saying Xavier Worthy's not worthy, or if Zach just has playing teacher spread, has a favorite in the draft.
What is this?
But I just want to put that out there.
That you are trying to spread. I absolutely said that he was not going to be there. That being said,
Zach has an unworthy shirt with
Xavier's
name on it. What?
Do you want to take Xavier Worthy at 22?
No, I feel like he drops in the second round, dude. I really strongly Morgan.
I don't see a way he makes it past
one of us
Kansas
on
City.
it. I feel like yeah, no. All right, whatever. We'll move on.
I mean, I'll say it right now. I'm with Zach. I don't think he's going to be there. You talk about 4.21 speed. I mean, John Ross got drafted before 22. So,
but here's my opinion. I feel like the John Ross issue will scare off teams when it comes to Xavier Worthy. I know
John
Worthy is a lot better.
That's the difference. Xavier Worthy is actually a football player.
I'm trying to make a pitch, guys. I'm trying to sell this to the world that when they start talking about it like this.
Right, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle is like it worked out, but realistically, he shouldn't have been drafted where he was, like et cetera, et cetera. Speed kills, and NFL teams will spend stupid draft picks on fast players, and it won't make them any better.
Quick poll for the audience: what can't you teach?
Oh man, I thought you were going to say breaking news or something like that.
Smarts. Oh, yep.
yeah, thanks, Morgan. Yeah. No, you can't teach speed. So I would be shocked if he's there by the second round for Philadelphia, even if we're talking about trade-up opportunities. I just don't see – thank you, Jay Fizzle, of course, having my back as always. I just don't see –
Hey, Fizz, I just want you to know that Zach says you can't beat up a kangaroo, bro. That's exactly what he said to me on the side before the show.
Man,
We're talking about
really
kangaroos.
stirring some shit today.
I'm just saying that's what
I said.
Sources told Flipping the Birds that Zach said Jay Fizzle cannot be a kangaroo.
Giants insider Brian Cameron says.
According to
you
my
can be
sources,
whatever you want, Jay Fizzle. You want a dolphin plasty, you want a kangaroo plasty, you can be whatever you want.
So enough of that stuff. Let's jump into the next topic, right? CJ Gardner Johnson put out a tweet an hour ago saying he's flying home with the Eagle. The Eagles have signed CJ Gardner Johnson on a 3-year, $33 million contract to bring back the swagger in the secondary. The fan base is split on this. Zach looks like something just happened.
He just found out.
Kelly Oubre absolutely just
yammed
on Isaiah Hartenstein. It was incredible.
Eagles signed Randy Moss or something.
Center will be talking about this for days.
Hartenstein loves
absolutely incredible.
I don't know.
Right.
There's certain players in the league that just love getting dunked on, and
Hartenstein was involved in that scrum last night, or not? I guess 2 nights ago now, when the Sixers and the Knicks were playing just the other day. That also involved Oubre, so it's a great moment for Oubre, great moment for Sixers fans. But back to the Birds.
CJ Gardner Johnson, back to the Birds.
Okay.
3 years, $33 million contract. Fan base is split on it. I know, and I want to say possibly factual, that the guys on this podcast are actually pretty happy about CJ coming back. When he was here, he was a perfect center fielder. Whether the Eagles add another safety, it doesn't matter at this point. He's still young. He's still damn productive. And to me, he brings something that we were missing last year, and that's pride in the secondary. Like, the guy has attitude, the guy has swagger, and he doesn't like to get punched in the mouth. I know fans are not happy about it because he came at the fan base. But what player doesn't come at our fan base and ends up signing with us? I mean, come on, guys. Look at Saquon.
Yeah.
Darius Slay is still coming at the fan base, and he's still with the Eagles.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna dish it, you got to be able to take it too, right? So, I mean, I really don't have any issue with the whole back and forth between Eagles fans and CJ Gardner Johnson. I think that, like, on paper, he's not the defense changing signing he was 2 years ago. Like, I don't think he's gonna make the same kind of impact. But I think my view changed a lot with Sidney Brown's injury. I think that this was a signing you needed to make, and you just needed to shore up the back end. And I think that was the best player to do it. So as much as, there might be some animosity, like, I feel like that's going to quickly go away when Eagles are reminded of just how good this player is. And like you said, Brian, like, I don't think there's any way that the Lions do what they did in the playoffs last year without CJ Gardner Johnson. He is a locker room changer. He walks around with swagger and a chip on his shoulder. And when you have such a young, developing defensive roster, you need a guy like that is now a veteran presence on this defensive side of the ball that has that chip on his shoulder, that has that attitude. Imagine if we get Nolan Smith running around like CJ Gardner Johnson was, right? Imagine if we get, I think Jalen Carter already kind of had that going on, but again, like, imagine Reed Blankenship hitting even harder because he's got that chip on his shoulder. Imagine Sidney Brown flying around that much more because, he's influenced by the veterans. And so I think it's a move you needed to make, and the animosity I understand, but that's part of who he is, and that is Philly. Like, tell me one resident in Philly that hasn't talked shit about someone and then dapped them up the next day. Like, I mean, I know I'm not from there, but
Zach just talked shit about Xavier Worthy and Fizz in one day. Like,
and if they drafted him,
keep it up. I'll talk shit about you too. Keep it up. Watch me.
You did that earlier today. I don't want to hear that.
And I'm gonna do it tomorrow too. I'll tell you right now.
Really quick though, we are at 501 viewers. Thank you to everybody that's tuning in. Make sure you guys do hit the like button if you are on YouTube or Facebook or even Twitter. If you're on Twitter, make sure you retweet it. Thank you guys for joining us today. We really appreciate it. But Zach, I mean, how you feeling about the return of CJ, GJ?
It's all love, honestly. I mean, Morgan's right. If you get dish it out, you got to be able to take it. One thing about fans of Philadelphia, we don't have a problem if you are giving 110% and if you're doing your job. Those are two things that Chauncey Gardner Johnson does. So I have no concerns about him coming back to Philly. And I think that he's kind of the same way. He's really had that kind of Philly personality his entire career, really. So if there's one guy who I'm not worried about coming here this offseason, definitely Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, because he's just going to fit right back in like a glove. I do agree with Morgan that he's probably not going to be quite the player that he was during that year with Philadelphia, but I do think he's still going to be quite the upgrade in the safety market. And as far as adding another safety, I still like looking at another one in free agency. Obviously, you mentioned Justin Simmons. I'd love to bring Justin Simmons in, even on a multi-year deal. I'm fine with that. I do have high hopes for Sidney Brown going forward, but the injury obviously does make a difference. Reed Blankenship, I love personally, but probably projects more as kind of a bench or rotation safety. There's definitely options for Philadelphia. I'm probably out on drafting a safety, unless you just have a guy who falls to you who's too good to pass up on. Like, I'll take Cameron Kitchens in the second round, for instance, something like that. But outside of that, I just don't really see a reason to draft a guy, because the safety room's honestly coming together, especially if they can land Justin Simmons.
Completely agree with that. Now, before we get into grading the first 2 days of free agency for the Eagles, I do want to answer 2 questions in the chat from our guy Fizz. His first question is, do you think Avonte Maddox comes back for depth? I have not rolled this out personally, because I feel like Maddox he's Philly through and through. This guy, he's a hell of a slot cornerback when he's healthy. The issue at hand, though, is when is he healthy? That's been a problem for the last couple of years. How do you guys feel about that?
I'd be thrilled if it happens, but I think that another team's going to be willing to pay him, slot corner one money, and I don't think the Eagles would. I think mostly because of the depth they have. Like, I think it's just Eli Rick's time, man. I think it's time. Like, see what he's got. I think he showed you enough last year. If it's not him, you have 3 young corners, and again, not their slot position is not going to be their best position, but you have 3 guys that at least deserve some playing time. I don't think you need to spend the money it would take to bring Maddox in. And again, I think he would take a hometown discount. I think he wants to be here. His best friend, Dallas Goedert's still here. I think there's a lot of reasons why it makes sense, but I think that he deserves to get paid like the talent he is. And unfortunately, he hasn't been able to stay healthy, but someone like, I don't know, the Falcons or the Panthers or a team like that is going to have the cap to give him the money that he realistically deserves. Because when he's healthy, he's a top 3 slot corner.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the question being, would he come back for depth? I think absolutely not. I think that wherever he goes, and he's a slot corner like that, we know that, but that's what he's going to be doing. He's going to be that team's primary slot corner. So could he come back to Philadelphia to fill that role again? I mean, maybe, but I agree. I think the film is out there. When healthy, he's extremely valuable, and so I think you can be looking at just one of these other teams scooping him up. I mean, the New Orleans Saints have already met with him. That's actually a matchup that I think is pretty solid. A marriage that would work out quite well for both of them. So we'll see exactly what happens, but I expect there to be some slot needy team that's looking to compete that can offer him more money than Philadelphia will. So I hate to say it, and I know Dallas Goedert doesn't like to hear it, but looking like the end of Avonte Maddox in Philadelphia.
Essentially, we're saying he's going to go to the NFC South. So if that happens, we're geniuses.
Could be any team in the NFC South, but that's it.
That's right.
Yes, sources have told PSN that he will be going to sign with a team in the NFC South. Jay Fizz's second question: how concerned with the pass rush and linebacker situation are you currently? None of this fixes that. None of this lowers expectations that we have for the Eagles to redevelop the pass rush and to actually rebuild the linebacker room. They need competent linebackers. They need guys that are going to go out there and be pretty damn good. I know a lot of people are down on Devin White, but he's not a bad pass coverage linebacker if you look at the numbers. I would like to see him in Philly, maybe a 1-year prove-it deal or whatever it costs. It feels like they need a stud. Nakobe Dean hasn't really been fully healthy. We don't know what they're going to do in the draft. It's not a great linebacker class, right? They got to get the right guys, and they're going to do it at the right price. But I'm hoping we don't end up in a situation where they're going bargain hunting in a position that is very, very, very necessary in this league.
Yeah, I'm definitely more concerned with the linebacker situation. To me, like, it's just shaping up for the Eagles to pick a corner in the first round. Just the way the draft is going to fall and the Eagles' needs, like it just seems like a match made in heaven. There's going to be 3 or 4 corners kind of sitting in that 20 range, and unless there's an early run, which there very well could be. But I mean, we were talking about Quinyon Mitchell, maybe being a second round guy like a month ago, and now all of a sudden, he might go in the top 15, right? So there's going to be someone that falls, and it just feels like it's the right time for the Eagles to take a corner. So I'd love to say that this gets addressed finally in the first round of the draft, but I don't think so. That being said, I think really the value for linebackers is in that second round. I think that's where most of the talent fits. So I could see the Eagles addressing it there. It also fits with the timeline. I don't know if getting a 1-year rental, makes you better outside of this season. And I just feel like Howie Roseman's window has shifted now to let's not just be a 1-year team. Because it used to be that, right? We're always filling gaps with veterans, and we did that again last year. Don't get me wrong. But I think that they're starting to realize that they need to build consistently year over year. So I think they need to add a young linebacker. There's just not that many options in free agency. Not that there's no options, but not what you'd like to see. There's no Bryce Huff just sitting there at 25 with his best years ahead of him. And so I think that unfortunately the Eagles might have to shore that up with someone like Devin White. But I would like to see them address it more long term. I just don't think that they're in a great situation to do that.
Yeah, I don't think Devin White has the ceiling that a Bryce Huff does. I think that and part of it's because he's played very well so far. But I do think Devin White would be a solid addition. I don't think there's that kind of cornerstone linebacker like you were talking about, Brian, left in free agency. If they're taking the Band-Aid approach, I mean, we're talking about probably a guy like Bobby Wagner, but you talked about how important the linebacker position is, especially for a team that doesn't have any like Philadelphia. Well, let's talk about running Vic Fangio's defense too, and how crucial it is to have quality linebacker play in that. So you're definitely going to want to be adding a guy. We saw Willie Gay leave the market today as well, 1 year, $5 million, I believe it was. You are frankly running out of options. And so, yeah, my concern level for linebacker situation is relatively high. Best way to cure that, draft Adrian Cooper, and I'll feel a lot better about it. But we'll see what happens come the draft time. But you're not really looking at a lot of great options left. You can't really find that combination of youth and affordability and talent that the Eagles would probably want. So you're going to make a concession in at least one of those areas. It's just, where exactly will they? So, I mean, honestly, if I'm making a prediction, I would be most curious to see about Bobby Wagner as a Band-Aid. I just don't see them giving big money multiple years to Devin White. I see them staying pretty far away from Devin Bush, talking about the other Devin. And Eric Kendricks is just a little bit long in the tooth. Obviously, he's younger than Wagner, but his play is dried up a little bit faster. So looking like the draft is going to be the best way to solve this for me.
The one thing we haven't mentioned that I'd be willing to see is it seems like a lot of teams are kind of cleaning house, especially on the defense. And I'd be curious to see which kind of linebackers are available for a trade, right? I think that we talked about James Bradbury potentially leaving. Who knows if Darius Slay is going to be around? That's a huge piece, right? That you can kind of offload for, absorbing probably some of that contract and taking on a pretty good linebacker. So I think the trade could be the way that they address the linebacker position.
I think they should go all in on Devin White. I mean, while Zach was talking and while you were talking more, I looked at the numbers, right? His first 4 years in his career, not the greatest of numbers, right? Coverage wise. And when I think about linebacker, I'm thinking about pass coverage just because the Eagles have been atrocious at finding somebody that could be decent, bring decent.
Yeah, we're talking about inside guys. We're not talking about edge guys, and we're looking more so. This is probably not that traditional 3 linebacker set we're looking at anymore.
Yeah, and then Devin White at 20, he's only 26 years old, which is great because you could sign him to a 3-year deal, which makes sense. Last year, he started 13 games, played in 14. He allowed a completion percentage of 67% for only 194 yards. 6.7 yards per completion, and a passer rating of only 65.5. I mean, he had only 6 missed tackles out of 83 tackles. To me, that's at least to me, that's a huge upgrade. That's over a Nicholas Morrow, over Zach Cunningham, over 100%. Shaq Leonard. Like,
can
he's
I bring up
26 years old.
Counterpoint?
Go ahead.
So when a lot of people were talking about bringing Patrick Queen into Philadelphia, right? The big conversation was, well, how much of his great play is more so a side effect of playing next to Roquan Smith? Well, you look at Tampa Bay's defense, you look at him playing next to Levante David, who has begun to lose a step, but is still Levante David. Mm-hmm. It was a pretty good situation for him as well. So you're looking at basically 1 year of that prime production in a situation that very much suited his skill set also.
Correct. But he's been with Levante David for his whole career, right?
Yeah. I mean,
his whole career, and he still had that great year last year. Yeah. I think that's what I'm trying to get at. Like, he's been with this guy, handcuffs to him, right? He's been doing his thing, being his Robin, but he might not be a bad Batman to a Nakobe Dean.
100%. And I think those stats, like that you just heard out, Brian, read that out to me, and it sounds like he's just a really good tackler, right? And that's been so sorely lacking from the linebacking core in the Eagles. It gets just an upgrade. So I like, as much as like, yes, I want them to address that position long term. I think that would be a fantastic pick if they can add Devin White. I don't even care if it's for 1 year. Like, add him for a couple of years. That's fine. Worst case scenario, he's depth for you. But I don't think there's any reason why he couldn't start for this team and be a contributor. They just need a linebacker that can tackle. Now, if they want to take that next step and actually, get a game changer at that position, I don't know that he's that long-term solution. But if they bring him in for a year, that absolutely makes your defense better tomorrow. 100%.
I would even be fine with like a 2-year or even 3-year deal just to have that layover Band-Aid where it's kind of like, if Nakobe Dean turns out to be the guy we think he is, great. If he's not, shit. Then you have Devin White to kind of hold you over as you navigate and try to find that franchise-style linebacker.
Yes.
All right, so go ahead.
I was just going to say, the one thing that I am curious about is how the market affects him. So Spotrac, for instance, has his market value at 2 years, $21.5 million. The average salary is high. If that comes down as he stays on the market, which he's sitting right now, then you can talk me into it. I'm thinking a 2-year deal does work for me. Probably a bit hesitant to go to 3, but depending on the guaranteed money, I'm not against it. He's not a bad player. I'm not trying to argue against him like he's a bad player, but I agree with Morgan that I don't think that he'll be that kind of end-all be-all solution to your linebacker problems.
I don't know if we're going to get to it, but the one signing we haven't talked about, which is critical, is they're bringing back a punter. Brandon, man, is re-signed. Finally, the Eagles have some stability at punter, man. Like, it just, I know it, it's very boring, but that's such a huge difference. And, he wasn't perfect last year, but he was definitely a step up from, what was it, 30 different punters they had the year before, right? Like, it just matters so much. You have a special teams that's turned itself around. The Eagles were always best when they had, Dave Phipp running the special teams, and it was, fantastic. And now finally they've got back to that, and they have a punter under contract. It's just like such a weight off your shoulders.
For sure. Yeah, no, it's really nice to have, and no love for Rick Lovato? No, it's nice to have both of them back. Looking at that stability in special teams obviously is crucial, but to have a punter, I'm just remembering Aaron Tsipos and some of those marquee punts. No, Braden Mann is a great guy. He's a great player. Very happy to have him back in Philadelphia for the foreseeable future. There is nothing I would like to do less than continue to hunt for a punter. So I'm very happy to have that stability, put that to bed, put that to rest, and then really just kind of get focused on filling in some of these other holes like a linebacker.
Completely agree with both those sentiments. All right, let's grade it. I mean, we're at the 55-minute mark. There's 567 of you guys in here. We appreciate you guys for joining us live. Make sure you tune in every Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. to watch Flipping the Birds. What would you guys grade this part of Eagles free agency so far? This start. I'll follow up.
I mean, are we dividing by days, or are we just doing it one as a whole?
It's probably just however you want to approach it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an A- for me. I would have liked to see linebacker be addressed. I think that as good as the signing is, I think it will be. There are still some question marks about Bryce Huff and how he's going to fit in. He has to take on a larger role. Saquon Barkley, as good as he is, I think that there's something to be said for the fact that I don't know if he's a major upgrade over DeAndre Swift. I think he's definitely a better and maybe more well-rounded player. But he's not going to get you an extra, 1,000 yards or anything like that. Right. So I think that's a really solid signing, still an A in my books. I really like to see them adding depth, right? CJ Gardner-Johnson's really good, but even to talking about Devontae Parker, right? I think that's a fantastic veteran signing. Why not bring him? You got him for pennies. So overall, it's an A- for me. The big thing being, I wish that linebacker situation was addressed, but it still could be coming, right? And so I think that that's really what I'm waiting on. It could be an A+. You can't really go wrong, honestly. Even looking at the contracts, I think you got Saquon Barkley at a really reasonable price. You're looking at what's comparable. Essentially, the only thing comparable is Christian McCaffrey's contract, and there's more guaranteed money, but it is cheaper per year. And then you're looking at Bryce Huff's contract as well for what could be a premier edge rusher. You're really not paying that much. So I think fantastic job by Howie Roseman, and I'm giving it an A-.
Yeah, no, I think you really kind of hit the nail on the head there. A-. If I want to be boring, I'd give it an A-, and just match you. But in an effort to be different and to have a little bit of excitement, I'm going to cheat and add in the Landon Dickerson signing, or extension rather, into this equation as well. And for me, that bumps it up to an A. Obviously, you're still missing out on linebacker. We still want to see how they address corner, but I do project it to be more so through the draft. Depth is still an issue. There's still this, that, the other thing. I actually wouldn't mind seeing if they add a veteran lineman. I know they added Matt Hennessy, but I wouldn't mind a second veteran offensive lineman being added to the equation as well. But no, so far so good for Philadelphia, and I'm trying hard not to get heavy into draft mode, but there have been a lot of needs solved so far for the Eagles. So until then, I'm going to hold off, but it's looking like it's going to end up being an A or an A+ offseason by the time all that's done. The rest of free agency, the draft, everything such as that. I do think that there is a chance that we may perhaps see Justin Simmons in this defensive backfield as well. And if that happens, I mean, I'm ready to go crazy, because you talk about all the different potential of being able to play these guys. I mean, just not even including Sidney Brown, but when you're looking at the safeties that they're going to have between Justin Simmons, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Reed Blankenship, you're talking about guys who can move in and out from the two safety spots, slot corner, talking about sub linebacker. There's a lot of positional versatility that you're talking about in the secondary that you could just not say last season. So this is, so far, I'm giving it an A, but there is potential easily to get to that A+ territory, because it's been a nice hot start for Philadelphia.
I'm with Zach. I would definitely give them an A. But I'm borderline A-, just for the simple fact that I feel like there has to be more added to the defense. I kind of wish they jumped on on Gay, honestly, on that 1 year, $5 million contract. It's so weird to say that. Morgan laughs. Bad terminology. My apologies. I do wish that they attacked the linebacker position a little bit more more quickly than they are right now. But I do think, if you end up with a Devin White, if you end up with some diamonds in the rough out there, then you definitely get into that A+ territory right before the draft, which is what you want to do. You want to have a Super Bowl roster before you draft, because the guys you draft are not the guys that need to be making the impact this season. They have a lot of question marks on the roster still. They have James Bradbury still on the roster. They have Darius Slay. We don't know what's going to happen with him. Is he staying? Is James Bradbury going? What's going on with that? We don't know what's happening with Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat. I hope Hassan Reddick is the one that stays and that they extend him. Josh Sweat is a perfect example of a homegrown player, and I love him to death. But in this case, he's going to be more costly next year than Hassan Reddick would be this year. So I feel like, you move on from Sweat, trade him, get some draft capital, and find a way to move up for a solid cornerback. But my thing is right now, like, you got to attack the cornerback position. You got to attack the linebacker position. You got to add more to the defensive line. You cannot go into the season thinking that you can just sack anybody you want without the right depth. Like, the whole thing is depth. You got to have it. And I feel like they still have moves to make, but they hit a home run with Saquon. They hit a home run with Bryce. They hit a grand slam with CJ. It's been great. I feel like we said this all last year. It's been weird to see such a very well-run organization continue to do things to put their team in the best position to win. The Eagles.
Can I add to that point too? Because I think it's really important to put it in context. Like, how many teams have had a terrible offseason? Like, you look at the Dolphins defense, gone. You look at, like, the Bills lost so many people, right? You don't know what the Titans are doing. Like, it just, in comparison, like, the Eagles are head above everyone else. Sorry, I didn't mean to interject, but
no, you're good. And listen, like, as you're saying that, like, I'm thinking, that's my dog barks. Xavier Howard is still out there. Tre'Davious White is still out there. You have solid veterans out there.
I don't know if Xavier Howard is probably going to be the guy coming back to Vic Fangio's defense.
Yeah. James Bradbury 2.0.
Yeah, it might just be. All right, take that back. You have Tre'Davious White out there. And you have trade bait out there, which I pray to God, if this is possible, if you can make Patrick Surtain a Philadelphia Eagle by the end of this offseason, I might just do backflips down my driveway. But
that's Howard statue territory.
Yes.
If they land
absolutely. There's no way you don't get a statue after that. I mean, imagine. Oh, wow. I don't want to talk about it. If it's just weird. Like,
we will be taking submissions for photos of Howie to use for the statue. So please send them to flippingthebirds@phillysportsnetwork.com, which is absolutely a real email and definitely not made up. But Brian, as you were.
Yes. They laid down the groundwork for a perfect offseason, which is weird to say. Like, the groundwork is there. You have the right pieces in the right places. Fill in the blanks. Get your linebacker. Get your secondary in control. Get another safety. Get a Justin Simmons. Get anybody. And just control what you can control. Put the right places on the field. Nick Sirianni, this is for you. Don't mess this up. That's all I want to say. Just don't mess.
It's scary at the end.
That's a great ending, I think, right there.
I think that's it right there.
It's even better that we're talking about how great it was after the fact. That's ruining the great ending.
Yeah. That was so good, guys. I don't know if you noticed how good that was. It was so good.
I think we get an A+, which is even higher than the A for Howie Roseman.
Listen, everybody that's viewing this gets A+. We're at 613 people viewing this live right now. We appreciate all of you for tuning in. Make sure you guys tune in next week to Flipping the Birds. We are live at 7:30 p.m. every Tuesday. Any last thoughts before we sign off?
Every-ish Tuesday.
Every-ish Tuesday. Depends on Morgan's schedule. we rotate around Morgan, apparently.
One last bit of breaking news before we go. It appears that our own Chris Infante is attempting to lure NFL Network insider Ian Rappaport to Philly Sports Network. So
let's go.
We will have updates accordingly on the progression of that story.
Philly Sports Network is getting an A+ for free agency, man.
Hey, it wouldn't be the first big name that we almost got.
That's true. Yeah,
that's very true. Not a lot of people know about that, but that's for the documentary.
Almost had LeBron
James later on A&E on Sunday nights at 7 p.m. But yeah, until next week, I'm Brian Cameron alongside Morgan Burkett, Zach Chavalella. Shout out to Eric Reese, who's covering the Flyers live at the Wells Fargo. We are Flipping the Birds.
Go Birds!
Go Birds!
Yes, sir. Flip